All right, so today I wanted to start out to talk a little bit more about the election, and the reason for that is I think this whole situation has the potential to become very, 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 very scary. And by that I mean violence, a lot more polarization. Again, it's like I mentioned too, this definitely has the possibility to make the current levels of polarization a heck of a lot more polarized because the situation that they're facing is, I mean, you have Kevin Sorbo pointing out here. Imagine if 138,000 votes had appeared out of thin air for Trump, not one for Biden. Could you imagine the outrage? Now, it's a very good point because this kind of stuff has happened to benefit Biden, and I think it's, let's be honest, it's very obvious to anybody even remotely paying attention at all that there is some shady stuff going on that is benefiting Biden. And I mean, there's many, many, many reasons to point that out. Stuff like this, number one, the fact that I've seen plenty of cases of cut and dry voter fraud. I mean, those videos have been going around. You have plenty of examples of postal workers and these ballot counters doing shady stuff. So I think it's very obvious that this kind of stuff is going on. And the way that you know that it's benefiting Biden is that the mainstream media is covering for it, right? The mainstream media is telling everyone, oh, it's not a big deal kind of stuff. So if the shady stuff was benefiting Trump, well, the mainstream media would be all over it. So that's a pretty easy way to tell that it's benefiting Biden. Now, what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is that as of right now, it's looking like Biden's going to win the election. But I think the caveat being he's going to win the election because of voter fraud, or at the very least, other forms of fraud. And what's probably going to happen is it's going to go through the courts. Trump is going to end up winning, and everybody, all these crazy people are going to be like, oh, Trump stole the election, and that's going to be what we're going to have to deal with for the next 3 or 4 years, and it's going to be probably even larger than Russia collusion and all that garbage. So that's the thing to look out for. But it's like I say, either way, this isn't going to be a good situation, and there would have been a very easy fix to this situation. Number one being the mainstream media and social media actually being objective, right? If they were actually objective, the amount of polarization would not exist these days. And the other thing being too is that they need to change their laws too. Like, why do they not have voter ID laws? If they had voter ID laws, like pretty much any country that actually has a respectable system, this kind number one, it would be a lot less likely to happen, and number two, it'd be a lot easier to figure out who actually won, right? Because you have people who are registered to vote, they need to show ID to vote, therefore fraud is a lot harder. And I think the whole mail-in system should have been reformed as well, given that the fact that it was largely unnecessary, right? Like a lot of these people that were voting through mail were doing it because they're irrationally paranoid about the virus. And the people that want to commit fraud knew that and they took advantage of it. So that's something to look out for. That's something to really look out for, that I don't think people realize just how polarizing things could get. And it could get to the point of a second civil war, too. This is something that a lot of people talk about, and a lot of people mock it, largely because they don't know what a civil war looks like. They hear civil war and they immediately think that it's going to be the exact same as the first one, which is completely asinine when you think of all the other civil wars that go on in other countries. There isn't necessarily clear, North versus South kind of things going on. So that's something to look out for as well. That if things continue to get more polarized, I think it's going to get worse no matter what. I don't see any way. I mean, it is possible, but I think it's highly unlikely that the amount of political polarization gets better over the next year or so. I highly doubt it. Highly doubt it. It is possible, definitely, but I highly doubt it. So that's the first thing. The next thing I wanted to bring up, again, this is stuff that I'm so tired of having to talk about stuff like this, but we have to because we still have a lot of complete and utter idiots running our country and our cities and our provinces and even counties, whatever. Um, from Ezra Levant here, the city of Medicine Hat, 2 deaths from the virus, um, and then 7 deaths from suicide attributable to the lockdown. Now, this is something that I'm so tired of talking about. And the big problem here is that you have these people that support the lockdown, and that, like I say, they genuinely believe. They genuinely believe, which to me, it's absolutely insane that people can be this ignorant. But I've seen them. I've even met some of them that they genuinely believe that there's no downside whatsoever to locking down. You know, there's going to be no depression. Nobody's going to lose their jobs. The economy's not going to suffer. All that kind. Oh, you'll bring up the economy and it's only the rich people, the corporations that are going to suffer. And even though it's the rich people and the corporations that are benefiting the most, again, the ignorance of these people is so insane. It's not even funny how ignorant these people are. It's not even funny. And the scariest thing about it too is that these people's votes matter just as much as you and mine, right? Like this is one of the many reasons why democracy will never work, is that you have people that literally could not be more clueless on some of these issues if they tried. You could pull someone in, some rural tribe in Africa, and they would be as qualified to vote on these issues um, as some of these people are. And that's the big problem. That's why society is doing so poorly these days, is that we have people who couldn't be more clueless if they tried, and their vote matters just as much as the people who are actually somewhat awake. Right. And here's the thing, like if you want to support the lockdowns and you're at least acknowledging all the downsides to the lockdowns, at least we can have a cordial conversation about it. Like at least we can have a respectable conversation. The problem is that I have yet to meet anyone or talk to anyone, because most of the time it's online. I have never talked to anyone, I can't think of any of them, that acknowledge the downside to the lockdowns. And the reason they don't do that is very simple, because if they did, it would show just how stupid their beliefs are, right? It would show just how stupid and paranoid they are. So that's another thing to bring up. Another interesting story here that I came across is this Mitchell Miller. He was drafted by the Arizona Coyotes, and he was, I assume that they knew, they had to have known. But he had done some. I mean, there's reports. I'm not 100% sure about exactly what happened, because I've seen conflicting reports. But the reports go something, on the low end to bullying, to on the high end pretty severe bullying with racism thrown in. So again, those are the reports that I've seen. But I just wanted to point something out here, because number one, why do we have to destroy people's lives over this kind of stuff? Like, can we not say, hey, part of your first contract's going to go to this kid that you bullied, or, something along those lines? Like, and here's the other thing too, like, was he punished at the time of doing this too? Like, I don't know the whole story. And here's the other thing too, I don't think that the vast majority of people calling for this kid's head know the whole story either, right? So that's something to point out as well. But again, like, can we figure out a solution where this kid can be punished? Because I don't think he should get off scot-free. Again, people will try and, whenever you point this kind of stuff out, people immediately straw man your argument of saying, "Oh, you're okay with racism? You think he should get off scot-free?" No, that I don't. I'm not okay with racism. I don't think he should get off scot-free. I just don't believe in destroying people's lives over stuff like this, right? So, but the bigger point I wanted to bring up is the virtue signaling aspect behind this. I can't stand the average person out there these days they're all over this kid. Like they're all over this kid. That his life should be destroyed. But they could care less. They could care less that people like, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, just off the top of my head, are directly responsible for thousands, probably even tens of thousands, but Kamala Harris literally had the power. She was a prosecutor who literally had the power to prosecute or not prosecute for nonviolent drug offenses, and she prosecuted, right? Kamala Harris is directly responsible for thousands of black people being in jail for nonviolent drug offenses. Which one is worse? Is severe bullying worse, or is throwing someone in prison worse? Right? I think it's throwing people in prison. And here's the other thing too. This kid was, I think he was like 14 or 15 when this happened. These are adults that we're talking about. Like, I don't understand how these people can argue in good faith that we should hold 14-year-old kids to standards we don't even hold adults in positions of power to. How does that make any sense? And here's the thing, all I'm asking for is a little bit of consistency on this kind of stuff. Like, if we're gonna throw people in jail, or destroy people's lives for racism, let's at least be consistent about it. Like, come on, people. Now, again, I'm not for cancel culture in any way, shape, or form. I think it's done far more harm than good. Again, they would argue that this isn't cancel culture, but again, if you're gonna destroy people's lives over racism, but you're gonna turn around and vote for these people, how insane can you possibly be? Justin Trudeau can wear blackface multiple times. Nobody cares, at least no one that supports him. If one of these prospects wore blackface multiple times, I don't know. They may not have gotten drafted as well. There may have been calls for them to get released or not, or whatever, cut. That's the thing that really bothers me. The thing that really bothers me is the rank hypocrisy on this topic, right? I'm not saying I know 100% for sure what should be done about this. It's not for me to decide, right? But the thing I'm simply pointing out is that if we're gonna hold kids to these standards, then we need to, for God's sake, we gotta hold the adults to the standards. And this is the thing that really bothers me about these people, is that they want to destroy this kid's life, not because they care about racism. I mean, they care about racism, but the bigger goal is the virtue signaling aspect of it. The bigger goal is the virtue signaling aspect of it, because people can call for this kid's head knowing there is going to be no blowback whatsoever. Nobody is going to call them out at all, right? But if you call for Joe Biden's head or Kamala Harris's head, there's going to be a lot of blowback. And that's the thing that I can't stand about people, a lot of people these days, is that whenever the chances of blowback is very low or non-existent, they'll get up on their moral high horse and they'll proclaim how virtuous they are to people. But the minute that the chances of blowback start to creep in, the minute that they could piss off the wrong person by actually doing the right thing, then all of a sudden they don't care, right? And that's the thing that really bothers me about these situations. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is from Paul Dirks here on Twitter, um, basically talking about the fact that the BC government wants to start teaching kindergarteners about very inappropriate stuff, and this is the way that things are going under these left-wing governments. This is the way things are going now. Why is this kind of stuff happening? Why do they do this kind of stuff? Well, it's just basic RK stuff, right? You have the more conservative side, which is the people that tend to be more conservative on this kind of stuff. They're not big on sexualizing kids, and they don't want to live in an overly sexualized society. And then you have the R people who are they're overly sexualized, right? And the simple reason being is that you have the one side that they like to put a lot of thought and a lot of time and effort into their sexual partners and their life in that way. You got the other side that really doesn't care. They have a spray and pray mentality. This is why single motherhood is so rampant these days, because society is moving further and further down the rabbit hole because we've normalized this kind of stuff. So again, whenever they want to sexualize kids, that is just code for we want to push more left-wing politics, because the whole RK thing, it's in a lot of ways it's conservative and liberal, right? And I don't understand how people can argue that this is okay? Like how can you in good faith argue that this is okay? Now, the other thing to point out here too that I really like to laugh at these kind of people for is that you have all these leftists that are far left, let's be honest about it, and they love talking about how they're center left, right? We're center left. And they're wrong. I mean, they're obviously wrong. Anybody with half a brain knows they're wrong. But the easiest example, the ways to tell that they're far left and they're not center left is that if they were center left, they would hold many positions that would have been considered too far to the right, too conservative for a center leftist from like 20 years ago to hold. If you would have told a center leftist 20 years ago that we're going to be pushing this kind of stuff on kindergarten kids, they would have thought you're crazy because that is something that's way out there and it's not way out there on the conservative side. So again, that's something I really like to laugh at is that these quote unquote moderate leftists hold many positions that would have been considered not just too far left, but way, way too far to the left 20 years ago or even 10 years ago in a lot of ways. So again, they're not center left. They are far left. And the fact that they have to lie to people, or at the very least they're so ignorant that they don't even realize the difference, just goes to show that they have bad intentions. If you have to lie to people about your beliefs, you have bad intentions. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So anyway, this is the very scary precedent, and here's the thing: like it's never going to be enough for these people either. Like a lot of people think, oh, they'll just do this and then they'll quit. No, they'll keep pushing it further and further and further and further. And the problem is that the further they push it, the harder the backlash is going to be whenever the backlash comes. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you follow me on BitChute, Twitter, Parler. Check out all those links. They're all in the description. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. Like I say, all those links are in the description.